Yo, what's up, everybody? We're going to be showing off an old school deck today. We've got a Sneasel Crobat deck from the Base to Neo era. Base to Neo is one of my favorite formats. It is very diverse. There's a lot of different decks you can play. A lot of these Base to Neo lists that I'm going to be showing off are from Jason Klaczynski's blog. I have taken his decks as inspiration and sometimes made a few changes to them. You can check out Jason Klaczynski's blog if you just Google it. Jason Klaczynski's blog. He's got an old school deck blog where he really talks about a lot of the history of the Pokemon trading card game. So big shout out to Jason for all of his old deck knowledge. I mean, he is a 3-time world champion, so one of the best players in the world as well, and definitely a huge source of knowledge as far as old Pokemon trading card game formats are concerned. As with almost every single deck in Base to Neo format, this deck also starts off with 4 Cleffa. Cleffa is an amazing card for setting your deck up. It plays 4 copy of Recycle Energy as well. Recycle Energy is the same as it is in standard format, so you can attach Recycle Energy to your Cleffa, and then when it gets knocked out, the Recycle Energy comes back to your hand. Cleffa's got that attack Eek. Eek allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 7 cards. Very good for getting your deck set up. All you have to do is find a Cleffa, and then all of the Pokemon in this deck have free retreat. Zubat has free retreat, Sneasel has free retreat, and Cleffa has free retreat. So an amazing Pokemon for this deck because you could just free retreat your Zubat into the Cleffa to go for a turn 1 Eek. You can also free retreat your Sneasel into Cleffa for a turn 1 Eek, and turn 1 Eeks just happen all the time with this deck, making it a very consistent deck in this Base to Neo format. Now, the main attacker in Base to Neo, or in the Sneasel Crobat deck, and one of the best attackers in Base to Neo format is Sneasel. You may have heard of Sneasel from Neo Genesis because it is extremely strong. It was in fact so strong that it was banned in Pokemon's first standard format. This is not Pokemon's first standard format because it did not undergo a rotation. So Pokemon's first rotated format, I should say, or first modified format, Sneasel was banned in. This is not that format, though. This is an earlier format. Base to Neo had no sets rotated out yet and no banned cards. So Sneasel was not banned yet and is a very strong Pokemon in this format. Especially for this beat-up attack. You might see the stats on Sneasel. It's got 60 hit points. It's a basic Pokemon with no retreat cost, no weakness, and a minus 30 resistance. Fans of this channel know that Sneasel is one of my favorite Pokemon, and this card is why Sneasel is one of my favorite Pokemon. This is one of the best, most notorious Pokemon cards ever printed. And if you play the Pokemon trading card game now, you may recognize this artwork is shared by the Sneasel, I believe, from Celestial Storm. So pretty cool to see that artwork reprinted on the Celestial Storm card. This Sneasel here, one of my favorite cards ever printed. And with no weakness, I mean, that's absolutely preposterous, really. Why does Sneasel have no weakness? Sneasel is actually 4 times weak to fighting in the video game, but this card in the trading card game, no weakness. So you gotta love that. Beat Up is the best attack on this card. You get to flip a coin for each of your Pokemon in play, including this one. This attack does 20 damage times the number of heads. So, if you have 6 Pokemon in play with a full bench, you can have 5 bench Pokemon, 1 in the active, 6 Pokemon, you get to flip 6 coins. Meaning that on average, with 6 Pokemon in play, Beat Up is going to do 60 damage for 2 energy. Now, that's before modifiers, because there are some modifiers in this deck. Darkness energy, back in the day, there is no such thing as basic dark energy in this base to Neo format. All darkness energy is special energy. So you can see we've got 4 copies of rainbow energy that can fulfill the darkness requirement, and you've got 4 copies of actual darkness energy. Now, I think that these old darkness energies are really, really cool because they have this effect that boosts the damage output of the Pokemon they are attached to. And unlike modern special energy that kind of just limits who you can attach the energy to, these darkness energy can be attached to anyone, except they have a drawback if they are attached to a non-darkness Pokemon or a Pokemon that does not have darkness in the name. So darkness energy reads, if the Pokemon darkness energy is attached to damages the defending Pokemon after applying weakness and resistance, the attack does 10 more damage to the defending Pokemon. At the end of every turn, put 1 damage counter on the Pokemon darkness energy is attached to, unless it's dark type or has dark in its name. Darkness energy provides dark energy and does not count as a basic energy card. So, this is very cool because it increases the damage done by Sneasel. So if you have 2 darkness energy attached to your Sneasel, that means that your Sneasel's beat up attack is going to be doing plus 20 damage. So beat up, I said, on average with 6 Pokemon in play, will deal 60 damage. If you have 2 darkness energy attached, that means on average, Sneasel is doing 80 damage, but can do up to 140 damage. If you flip 6 heads, it's 120 plus 20, 140 damage, and it's an attack that a basic Pokemon can use on the second turn of the game. So an incredibly potent and efficient attack there. Now, there are some hurdles for Sneasel to overcome, but as you can see here, Sneasel is just a very aggressive Pokemon that takes very quick knockouts and can quickly overrun the opponent's deck if they do not have the tools to stop it. So Sneasel and the Darkness Energy, very powerful. And like I said, the Darkness Energy boost Darkness type Pokemon. They actually boost everybody. Anybody a Darkness Energy is attached to is going to be doing 10 more damage when Darkness Energy is attached. But if you attach Darkness Energy to a non-Darkness type Pokemon like Cleffa, that Cleffa is going to be taking 10 damage between turns, like poison almost. Think of it like that. Like the Darkness Energy kind of poisons Pokemon that are not Darkness type or that do not have Darkness in their name or Dark in their names, which is interesting. So cards like Dark Golbat, they can wear Darkness Energy without taking the residual damage because they have Dark in their name. Similarly, Dark Crobat can also wear the Darkness Energy and will not take residual damage because they have Dark in the name. So I think that's a really cool little interaction that the Darkness Energy has in this deck. And then the Rainbow Energy is actually the only other way to provide Darkness Energy typing in base to Neo format. So you have 4 Darkness Energy in the deck, and then you have 4 Rainbow Energy in the deck, and that's it. So that was kind of a way of nerfing Sneasel's potency, was that there were only 8 energy in the deck for Sneasel to use with that beat up attack. And of course, as we know from previous videos, you guys are aware that there are energy removals in this format as well. So with only 8 energy to use Sneasel's beat up attack, and energy removals in the format means that these precious Darkness and Rainbow energies are going to be under fire constantly by your opponent's energy removals. In the last deck we looked at, the Charmander deck, the Blaine's Charmander deck, certainly would have a field day removing these Darkness Energy and Rainbows from play. Now, Sneasel does have another attack, Fury Swipes. It's not nearly as good as Beat Up, but Fury Swipes, you can flip 3 coins. This attack does 10 damage times the number of heads. So if you do have just 1 Darkness Energy attached to your Sneasel, you can use Fury Swipes, flip a couple coins, and you could deal, plus 10 damage with the Darkness Energy, so that's pretty cool. If you flip 2 heads with Fury Swipes, plus 10 with the Darkness Energy, you're dealing 30 damage. If you flip 3 heads, you could do 40 damage, and so on and so forth. So that is pretty useful, especially in this deck, which runs the Crobat to do additional damage. Now, if you thought the Sneasel did enough damage as it is, I've got some good news for you. This deck can do even more damage with Dark Golbat and Dark Crobat. So the deck plays 4 copies of Zubat, which all have free retreat, which is excellent because it allows you to pivot and retreat into your Cleffa for early Eek attacks to be able to set the deck up. And it also plays 4 Sneasel. You can retreat into your Sneasel very easily. Dark Golbat is where things start to get interesting. So Dark Golbat is a stage 1 with an awesome Pokemon power that deals damage to whoever you want. Golbat also has free retreat, fighting resistance, only 50 HP, but an amazing ability, or Pokemon power I should say. It reads, when you play Dark Golbat from your hand, you may choose one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you do, Dark Golbat does 10 damage to that Pokemon. So if you are familiar with the Golbat and Crobat from Phantom Forces, Dark Golbat and Dark Crobat are more or less miniature versions of those cards. Dark Golbat's sneak attack ability does 10 damage to whoever you want upon evolution. So that's really good because it allows you to snipe out baby Pokemon. It allows you to basically boost the damage done by your Sneasel and can help fix numbers. Say Sneasel is just 10 damage short of taking a knockout, and Dark Golbat can fix that. So we got a good question in the chat. Beelzebozo says, the ability reads, does 10 damage too. Was placing damage counters not a thing back then? Yes. Placing damage counters was not really a translation that existed back then or wordage that existed back then, but Sneak Attack in essence does that. So cards like Defender and Special Metal Energy do not prevent this snipe damage from going on. But that is why that these are, a lot of these old cards like Rainbow Energy. Rainbow Energy also reads it does 10 damage instead of placing a damage counter, which is why they're not legal today because the wordage is too different. So good question. So Sneak Attack, yes, does 10 damage to a Pokemon when you evolve it, and then it does have an attack Flitter. You get to choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, and it does 20 damage to that Pokemon for 2 grass, but you're almost never going to be using that Flitter attack. You could attach 2 Rainbows to Golbat. That's basically never happening. And then the best part of the deck, in my opinion, is the Dark Crobat. And you can see I've even got one, what is this? French? Nostensfer Obscure. I just like Nostensfer Obscure. I've got another English one. I just kind of like Nostensfer Obscure. I think he's very cool. All right. Dark Crobat has no retreat cost, 70 HP, and an ability Surprise Bite. It's not an ability, it's Pokemon power. I keep getting that mixed up. When you play Dark Crobat from your hand, you may choose one of your opponent's Pokemon. This power does 20 damage to that Pokemon. So, when you have Dark Golbat and Dark Crobat, between the two of these, you can evolve into Dark Golbat and place 10 damage. Then you can evolve into Dark Crobat and place 20 damage. which is perfect for knocking out baby Pokemon. And we've already talked about how baby Pokemon are played in almost every single deck, right? So Golbat and Crobat form a way for you to knock out baby Pokemon without actually having to flip. So you don't have to flip a coin in order to place your ability damage onto the baby Pokemon, which makes this deck extraordinarily powerful because you can knock out baby Pokemon without flipping. And with a 4/4/4 Dark Crobat line in the deck, you are going to have multiple opportunities to snipe down these baby Pokemon throughout the course of the game, which is very good. So when you're playing against this deck, you have to be very careful not to bench too many baby Pokemon because the ability damage will just ramp up so quickly. So that's a really cool aspect of this deck. The Crobat is so fun to play with because it allows you to just snipe all over your opponent's board and really take advantage of overbenching and really take advantage of the baby Pokemon, which are so difficult to knock out with all of the annoying coin flips. So Dark Crobat kind of comes in and is like, oh, you've got baby Pokemon, I can knock those out, no problem. And it's a really sweet deck to play. So you can see, even against that deck, like the Charmander deck that we showed off before, Dark Crobat has a way to deal damage to that deck, even if it runs out of energy. So let's move on to the trainers here. I will go ahead and show off those recycle energies that we have in the deck. We already talked about those. I'll go ahead and put these out as well for us to see. First up, we got Hyper Devolution Spray. Hyper Devolution Spray is basically just a Devolution Spray card. Choose one of your evolved Pokemon, take the highest stage evolution card from that Pokemon, and put it into your hand. So that's amazing because we play 4 of them. And basically, you're going to be taking your Crobat, using the Surprise Bite Pokemon power, and then using Hyper Devolution Spray to pick the Crobat back up, and then you could do it again next turn. And we could see just how absolutely degenerate this deck can get. And you're evolving into Crobats turn after turn, sniping all over your opponent's board, and using Hyper Devolution Spray to just devolve them, do it again, and you could absolutely devour any sort of baby Pokemon that your opponent has in play, and you get to boost Sneasel's damage output to unreal numbers because you could use Dark Golbat and Dark Crobat to bring those high HP Pokemon into a reasonable range for you to knock out, and then use Sneasel's beat up attack to finish them off. Now, to go along with the Hyper Devolution Spray, we also have 3 copies of Super Scoop Up, which is hilarious because Super Scoop Up was also played. I actually also played 3 copies of Super Scoop Up in my regional winning Lambats list, right? So it's kind of funny to see that same strategy reused, in an old school deck. Super Scoop Up allows you to pick up the entire Crobat line, so you can just put the Dark Crobat and the Dark Golbat all into your hand if you flip heads on Super Scoop Up, and then you can re-evolve them with other Crobats, other Zubats that you have on the bench. So the idea might be that you evolve into Dark Crobat, use Surprise Bite, hit a Super Scoop Up, pick up the entire line, lay the Zubat down, take the Golbat that you just scooped up, lay it back down on a fresh Zubat, and then you get to deal 30 damage all in one turn with your Super Scoop Up. In order to get valuable trainer cards back from the discard pile, play 3 copies of Item Finder. Item Finder is basically like an old school dowsing machine. You discard 2 of the other cards from your hand in order to put a trainer card from your discard pile into your hand, so you could get valuable Hyper Devolution Sprays or Super Scoop Ups back from the discard pile. You also play 3 copies of Computer Search. You just get to discard 2 cards from your hand and search out whatever card you want in your deck and put it into your hand. Great for getting Cleffas out of the deck so that you could just start using Eek to set the whole deck up. This deck a lot of times is going to want to Eek for the first few turns and really just find all of your Zubats. And then once you get your board established with all of your Zubats, then you're going to want to go in with Lass, right? So you will Lass your opponent. You'll remove both you and your opponent. You'll remove all of the trainer cards from your hand, and then you're safe to start attaching the darkness energies to your Sneasels. And that way, if you use Lass, then your opponent is not going to be able to, well, most likely not going to be able to find the energy removal to remove your darkness energies from your Sneasels. So 2 copies of Lass, very good for slowing the opponent down and keeping the energy removals out of their hand. Speaking of energy removal, we do play 2 copies of our own super energy removal just because it's that broken of a card that we kind of have to play it. 2 copies of Professor Elm, and Professor Elm is really cool because it's like the very first supporter card ever printed, and it's not a supporter card, but it reads kind of like a supporter card. It's such a good draw card that they had to nerf it in some way. You shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 7 cards, and you can't play any more trainer cards this turn. So it was a way for the developers of the Pokemon trading card game to kind of institute some sort of draw limitation without inventing the supporter card yet. So Professor Elm, kind of a first of its kind, a trainer card that did have some limitations on the amount of trainer cards you could play after it. Professor Elm, very good for getting the deck set up, and better than Professor Oak in a lot of ways because you get to shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 7 cards, so you don't have to discard valuable resources like you would with Professor Oak. A very strong setup card there. And then we do have 2 copies of Professor Oak, which is a disruptive setup card because you'd have to discard cards like your Crobats and things like that. But still very good. And then Good Manners, one of my favorite Pokemon search cards from back in the day. We can see it's got Erica on it. In order to play this card, you can't have any other basic Pokemon cards in your hand. You show your hand to your opponent, then search your deck for a basic Pokemon card, show it to your opponent, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So, Good Manners, very cool. I mean, it's not as powerful as a card like Nest Ball, right? Which just gets to search a Pokemon for free. But Good Manners, still really solid because you can go get a basic Pokemon out of your deck if you don't have any other basic Pokemon in your hand, and you do have to reveal your hand in order to play it. Still very good for searching out Sneasel, also good for searching out Cleffa and your Zubats. So a must-have in a lot of these base Neo decks. And then we also have got 2 copies of Double Gust. Double Gust is just an insane card. It reads kind of like Guzma, right? It says, if you have any benched Pokemon, your opponent chooses one of them and switches it with the active Pokemon. Then, if your opponent has any benched Pokemon, choose one of them and switch it with his or her active Pokemon. So the cool thing about Double Gust is that it works kind of like Guzma. It's a switch and a gust at the same time. However, if you read it there, you'll notice that your opponent gets to pick the Pokemon on your bench that comes into the active position. For most decks, this would be a huge problem, but for a deck like Sneasel Crobat, it's no problem at all because all of your bench Pokemon have free retreat. So it doesn't matter who your opponent decides to bring up with Double Gust because everybody on your bench is going to have free retreat. So Double Gust is basically just a Gust card where you get to pick a Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field, bring it in the active position, and then your opponent is going to bring somebody up, but it doesn't matter who they bring up because they all have free retreat, and you're going to get to retreat them right away. And then finally, we've got Nightly Garbage Run, basically a Super Rod from the Neo era, and then this crazy mistranslated card. If you guys have ever seen this card, it's just mistranslated and they never fixed it. Rocket's Minefield Gym. Whenever a player puts a basic Pokemon onto his or her bench from his or her hand, he or she flips a coin. If tails, it reads, put damage counters on that Pokemon. but it never says how many damage counters are supposed to be placed. This card had an errata. It's supposed to be 2 damage counters. So, whenever a player puts a basic Pokemon onto his or her bench from his or her hand, they flip a coin. If tails, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. It's kind of like whatever that Magma Stadium that was being played a couple years ago in like 2017 that automatically put 2 damage counters on non-Magma Pokemon. Rocket's Minefield Gym is kind of like the same thing, but on a coin flip. And it's really good because, was it Plasma? I'm thinking of the Magma one. There was a Magma one that was played in the Drampa decks, right? So, I really like this card in this deck because obviously if somebody tries to put like a baby Pokemon into play and they flip a tails, then they have to put 20 damage on the Cleffa, and then that means that Cleffa is just able to be knocked out by a single Golbat snipe. So a very cool deck, one of the strongest decks from the base to Neo format for sure, and an absolute blast to play. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to check me out on Twitch, where I stream every single weekday, twitch.tv/TrickyJim. Also, make sure to check out FullGripGames.com. We have a ton of these old school Pokemon cards available on FullGripGames.com. Also, make sure to check out FullGripCodes.com, where you have instant PTCGO code delivery. If you're here with me on Twitch, hang tight. We are going to get started with one more deck profile here today while the servers are down on PTCGO for maintenance. We will be right back with